ready to talk hockey. Streaming from the Oilers Live Studio. Subscribe or follow today.
Hey, it's Michael here with another Tuesday edition of Oilers Live Tuesday. And excited to have as my guest today, Avry. And Avry, if you follow along, you follow him on Twitter at Avry. It's pretty simple. And he is the host of Avry Sports Show, Brad and Avery Hour, and ZoneTime. Pretty exciting, as well as a regular contributor to a ton of different sites, not to mention the Edmonton Stingers, which is pretty darn cool. Welcome to the show, Avry.
Pleasure to be here, Michael. How you doing tonight?
I am doing great. Of course, it feels like forever since we've had an Oilers game, doesn't it?
Right, yeah, it's been a little while. Yeah, what about a 3 or 4 day break and then they're playing Dallas tomorrow night? So yeah, it's been a little bit here.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? You get we get to these things where it just feels like, it should be almost every day. Like this schedule has been ridiculously crazy. But I think if you've been watching, and I suspect you have, I feel like Draisaitl's been playing somewhat injured, so I think a few days off will be nice. And I have no doubt he's going to want to get back in, and I know Matthews has taken a couple nights off, so maybe this is Draisaitl's chance to take a legit shot at the Richard Trophy. Yeah, so that's where we're at. I mean, this is. We've got, it's a rarity that the Tuesday nights don't fall on a game night lately, so I've been moving my schedule around either to be pre or post game. And I'm pretty excited, though, to have a night where I can just do it at the regular time and maybe even get to bed at a reasonable hour for a change, which actually won't happen, but... that's the way it goes. So tell me, Avery, your thoughts so far. Let's just talk a little bit about the Oilers lately. I've been listening. I listened to a lot of different NHL radio. Oilers still don't seem to get a lot of respect out there, but they're coming off of 2 shutout games, both with Mike Smith in net. Your thoughts on how the Oilers are playing, and do you think they are now a contender?
Right now they do deserve respect. They played great games on the road. They beat the Golden Knights. They beat Nashville, and full credit to Mike Smith. If you follow me on Twitter, I've been very harsh on the goaltending this year. I've been very harsh on Smith and Koskinen, but credit where credit is due. Mike Smith, in his last 8 starts, he's 7-0-1. He's got a 1.87 goals against average, and heck, you mentioned right there the back-to-back shutouts. One thing about Mike Smith, he's a guy when he's on a heater, he can roll with the best of them. But right now, the big thing is, can he sustain that for the postseason? And can Koskinen sustain a postseason run? That's the big thing. But for right now, this team's playing well. They deserve to be in second in the division. They're getting great scoring from the forward lines. And even when the big guys like a Draisaitl or Connor aren't scoring, we saw in the game against Vegas, we saw guys like Warren Fogle step up. We saw on the back end, Cody Ceci scored. We saw Zach Cassidy with a great play. So there are signs of life from this team's forward group outside of the big names like Connor and McDavid and Zach Hyman, which is a good thing because come playoff time, you need your other guys outside of your top line contributing in major ways in a postseason series.
100% agree. Do you count yourself in the surprised category of the Oilers' play of late since Woodcroft has joined the team, or is this a I knew it all along person? Are you a I knew it all along person?
I'm not surprised at all. I've been watching what Jay Woodcroft has done down in Bakersfield. He's turned that franchise into one of the better teams in the American League so far. He was someone who I, for a very long time, was saying that if you replace Tippett, go out and call up Jay Woodcroft and Dave Manson as well, too. Those two have brought a proper structure in to the franchise so far. It isn't surprising at all. Offensively, defensively, you're seeing these guys playing really well. And someone like Ryan McLeod, who I asked Woodcroft about what does it mean that he sees his development progress even more. His guys in Edmonton have played really well. McLeod played well. When he was called up, Brad Malone, we saw Brad Malone score when he got called up. His guys have played well, and you've seen young guys get their stride on the Woodcroft. So, no, I wasn't surprised whatsoever. And he is someone who I feel that you have to lock up as your next head coach. The interim title can't come off from soon enough, Mike.
Yeah, 100% agree with that too. It's going to be an awful episode if we agree on everything, as they say, which it sounds early like that's going to be the case. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Woodcroft. I'm a big fan of what he's done. I'm not surprisingly excited about the players up and coming. McLeod is somebody we've talked about lots on this show. Everybody in oil country is talking about McLeod. How can you not? The kid flies. He does everything well. He plays really well, only getting, 9, 10, 11 minutes a game at max. Playing on that fourth line, you get what you ask from him and more. And he makes smart plays. And he's still a young kid. Lots of place to go. If you're looking ahead to the playoffs, who on this lineup do you think is going to be our next Fernando Pisani?
That's a tough guy. That is a tough question to ask. That is tough. I don't know if you can. Oh, wow. Who'll be next Pisani? That's tough to ask one guy to be, the 15 goals a postseason kind of guy. But if I were to pick someone to be the next Pisani of 06, that's a tough question. You know what? I'll go young Kaler. I will say Kale Yamamoto will be our guy who is a Pisani who finds lightning in a bottle. I've liked his game for a very long time. And what I like about Kaler the most is that he is he's a short king. I like to call him. He's a short king, but he plays like he's 6'5". There's no backing down in his game for a guy who is maybe 5'6". I'm 5'8", so I can talk about the guys like that who are short. I'm a short guy myself. And seeing Kaler play like that, play like he's a guy who's 6'6", 6'7", I love that. I think he's a guy who will find his scoring touch more come the postseason and become that folk hero to the fans in Edmonton.
Yeah, you could be right on that. I think, the thing about Yamamoto, when he's hot, right? Mm-hmm. And we saw that when he went back to junior in Spokane, and he went on, I don't know, an 80-game point-scoring streak or whatever it was. It was at least in the teens at the very least. He came up, of course, got called up, playing on Draisaitl's line, and he was outstanding. And he plays the type of game where he's either on a hot streak or it's really cold, but he does the right things, right? He gets out there, he's hard on the forecheck, he plays a big game, like you say. I love to watch how he plays. It goes up against the biggest guys nonstop, and he doesn't back down. He just gets right in there. And if I was his size, I can't say that I'd do the same, but he does it, and he's consistent, and he's been used up and down the lineup. But Draisaitl loves having him on his line. McDavid loves having him on his line, as far as we're told. I could see him being the guy. The guy that I'm curious about myself, if we go a little bit more in the Pisani direction, like a third or a fourth line kind of guy that gets on a bit of a hot streak, I'm really curious what kind of game we get out of Foegele. And then again, maybe McLeod is the guy, right? Those are the character guys. And the Oilers' record when Foegele scores a goal is absolutely ridiculous. What is it now, 9-0-1?
Yeah, it's about that.
Yeah.
So, against Vegas, he scored the goal against the Golden Knights, which looked McDavid-esque. Like, that was a great goal Foegele scored in that win.
He's a guy that, if you got the scouting report on him early, same sort of thing as Yamamoto. Streaky player. When he's playing hot, he's, potting goals. So I would love to see him in the playoff run. What do you think about Vegas? Here's a team that has had nothing but success since they entered the league. They lose to New Jersey in probably, what is New Jersey's won, 27 out of a third of their games this year. They're 401 points percentage. What do you make of this team?
You know what? For the record, I am someone who, when Vegas came to the league, I was on their wagon 100% because I love seeing expansion teams go on and win. I love new markets doing well off the bat. So I was on their wagon from day one. But now you're seeing this is a banged up team. They haven't had a healthy team all year long. They've lost Pacioretty, Stone, Leonard was hurt as well too. They've had to rely for the most part on Logan Thompson in net. And unfortunately, I think things have that little bit of luck they've had over the past few years has dried up for them. And now they're unfortunately going to be in salary cap hell for a little bit. And it sucks because when the Golden Knights are on, they're one of the more exciting teams to watch in the league. And right now, for Pierre DeBoer's crew, time is running out. And to be quite frank, I really feel they should have never fired Gerard Gallant. I think he was the perfect coach for that franchise when they fired him after their little streak a couple of years ago. They should have hung on to him. And right now, DeBoer is in some trouble. I really feel. And you look at the Golden Knights, they're a team like they've proven that not winning is grounds to fire somebody. So I could see if they don't make the playoffs, DeBoer could be looking for a new job if they don't turn things around. But you know what? If any team is going to make up that gap of 3 or 4 points and get a wild card spot or the third spot in the Pacific, it might be them. They might find a way to do it because as much as LA's schedule is easier than the Vegas one, you can't automatically assume they'll hold on to that spot. LA lost Drew Doughty. So to me, it's still up in the air. I think that final playoff spot comes down to game 82 if Vegas makes it or not, Michael.
Yeah, you're probably right. It could be right down to the wire. I think it will depend on how the Knights show in the next couple of games. Of course, Vancouver's breathing down their neck. I think a win tonight puts them past Vegas in the standings. The Oilers are a magical 2 games away for their magic number now. Is that hard to believe after December that we had? Or again, I mean, did you feel like they would come back? I don't know what to think. I had them out, and it's, you could go back on YouTube and check. I said multiple times there is no way this team is making the playoffs. When they let go of Tippett, I knew Woodcroft would make a difference. I really did. But if you look at this team, they're in the top 3 in points since Woodcroft joined the franchise. I'm still in shock. Is there any level of shock for you that we're magic number of 2 right now going into the final 5 games?
I don't think there's shock. I would say if Tippett was still here, I probably would have been shocked because when Tippett was still there, that team was not in a good spot at all. You're right. If Tippett wasn't let go, this probably still wouldn't have been a non-playoff team. They were not in a good spot. Things were not clicking. And it was clear that Dave Tippett's time in Edmonton had come to an end. Should they have pulled the trigger should they have pulled that trigger sooner? Absolutely. I feel they waited still, probably a month too late to do it. And thank goodness they've turned things around because if they didn't, well, now you're looking at the potential of the tenure of Holland probably ending as well too. So when they brought in Woodcroft, I was surprised to see him turn around. I knew that he was a guy who could find the most potential of this team still. But yeah, if they had retained Tippett and still found a way to make it, it would have been in spite of Tippett, not because of him.
Yeah, that's always the concern, right? And I had that concern early on. Oilers went on a little bit of they went on a 2-game heater at one point after we were all calling for Tippett's head. And I remember they went, they win 2 back-to-back. And all I could think of is this is saving Tippett's job. It's prolonging the inevitable. And it's not him that's getting us there. It's this team, which is full of character, full of skill. It's got a lot going for it. There's some holes, obviously. We know that. Goaltending, even though we've coming off back-to-back shutouts, is still a hole on this team, whether we want to believe that as Oilers fans or not. But I was legit worried that, those 2 games would keep Tippett behind the bench for longer. And they did. They kept him behind the bench for a couple games. And then the same goes, though. What's your thought on Holland now that, the goaltending seems to be, is this a very similar thing? I mean, you've got to think that if this team doesn't make it past the first round, Holland might be in jeopardy.
I fully agree because if they don't get past the first round, it'll be 3 straight years of one and done in the postseason. And when you're a team that's supposed to be battling for a Stanley Cup, or at the very least battling to be in the conference final, it's not good enough. You can't have a 3rd straight year where after losing to Chicago, they should have beaten easily. Losing to Winnipeg, should have beaten easily. You can't go into a third straight series and lose to either an LA or Vancouver or Vegas. It's not good enough when you have McDavid or Draisaitl, on top of the fact that he's made acquisition. Like, some acquisitions he's made have not been the best. We know what happened with the deal where Chicago won the deal to bring in Keith. And we know that other deals have not been the best. Granted, the Evander Kane deal, short-term deal, has worked out for the most part. But when it comes to the future, you have to get a guy, if they don't make the post or they don't get past the first round, who can get them past this first round. Because at what point do you say enough's enough? Because this is a team that is supposed to be a cup contender. Just getting in isn't good enough. And if you are Nicholson or Cates, you gotta say, you know what? Can't get it done. We gotta find somebody else who does it. And preferably, if you do move on from Holland, I really feel next GM should be someone with no ties to the past of the Oilers or Hockey Canada. Bring in someone completely new.
We've been saying that, though, for over a decade now, right?
That's true.
So while I'm hopeful, I'm not. I doubt it. I doubt it'll happen that way. It has to be a shift in the overall administration head office of this Oilers franchise before that happens, and it's possible. But the reality is they changed the GM to somebody that's not related somehow to the old boys club, and the old boys club, though, is still pulling the strings up above. So I'm hopeful. I doubt it'll happen, at least right now. But you never know from an ownership perspective how much more Daryl Cates can take of watching the Oilers underperform for the last few years with arguably the best two players in the league.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, we need goaltending. What's your thought? I mean, this is the same defense that we had even 2 weeks ago, even 3 weeks ago. We've got Keith and Bouchard, who, by the way, were absolutely horrendous in the Minnesota game. Specifically, Keith. I'm not going to throw that fully on Bouchard, although he wasn't great. But we know Bouchard's not great on D. That's something you kind of give up with when you got that type of offensive talent. You expect him to be okay on D, but makes it up, on the offensive side. Has the defense changed the last two games? Is this a Mattson thing? He comes in and he's made some significant changes that are finally catching on, or is this just a blip, or is it more Mike Smith? Like, what's the story in your mind why the last two games we've been successful in keeping the puck out of the net?
I would say the Minnesota game was a little bit of an odd blip. I mean, that's a team that Edmonton has to find a way to win against. Unfortunately, I think Keith had a game that was a game to certainly forget. He's a guy who I feel should be playing more in the third line, third pairing. But you know what? I've liked the game of guys like Brett Kulak. He's been someone who I didn't mind him bringing him in. He's been great defensively in front of the net. Cody Ceci and Darnell Nurse. I know those two guys had their ups and downs, but I'm still a big fan of Cody Ceci and what he's done so far. He's impressed me in these past few games. And remember, when they brought in Cody Ceci, people were saying, no, why did they bring in Cody Ceci? Because in Pittsburgh and Toronto, he had struggled. I feel he's the kind of guy who need that fresh start from Edmonton. He need that fresh start elsewhere. And he's showing that he can still be capable D-man. I've liked his game. And Darnell. Darnell is someone where you see him, when he gets in the rush, he has an offensive mind. I love that about his game. And to me, he is still the number one D-man on this franchise. He is still someone you're going to need to play those big minutes when you're playing against Vegas, LA, Vancouver. He can do it. We saw last year against Winnipeg. He played an hour, 60 minutes in Game 4. Not many guys can do that. I mean, doesn't matter if it's NHL, AHL, Beer League, Pee Wee. Asking a guy to play an hour is near impossible. So he's the kind of guy who I still believe in very much so. And I think he's improved quite a bit this year. Like I think his game has been more in the upswing compared to earlier this year, Michael.
I think you're right. Look, the defense is I still think there's a lot of holes in this defense, specifically, if you look at, I think actually the holes are that we've got a guy playing second line D and Keith that really should be a third line D guy.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And I love Woodcroft, but he still suffers from what a lot of NHL coaches suffer from, and that's playing by contract in some regard, right? And you can't put a guy like Keith on the third line D with that contract, just like we haven't seen Cassian sit a game. In that Minnesota game, I look at that and I see Keith out there in the third period. It makes me I just get frustrated watching that, right? And as I've said before, it's hard to criticize Woodcroft because he's really helped turn this season around. But he's saddled with the roster he's got, and he's doing the best with it. 100% on Kulak. That guy's been he's been outstanding. Good to see a hometown boy come to Edmonton and do really well. He had a couple of poor outings, I think, in his stay so far, but that's to be expected, I think. New team. Other than that, he's started to really show, what I think we expected to see from him. Great pickup. CC, I love the way CC's played. I love his patience. I love, how he's up in the play. He doesn't sit back. How many times has he been? You could count, a dozen times in a game where he's catching the puck at the offensive blue line and getting it towards the net. He's not an offensive guy, but that's what you've got to do to be successful. You've got to keep the puck down low. It's better in their zone than it is in ours, and CC continues to do that consistently with a lot of patience. I would say my biggest concern when I look at this defense going into the playoffs, and we've talked about this all year long. We talked about it in the off season. We'll probably talk about it in the playoffs if it comes to pass. There's still nobody there outside of Nurse that you're really overly scared to play against, right? Nobody. When I mean scared to play against, I mean like Pronger type scared, right?
Yeah.
Like scared of the forearm shiver, scared of going into the corner and feeling the wrath of some big defenseman, feeling the, like Adam Larson pushing guys around, right? The way Dash pushes around Mike Dursa on straight off the pipe, that sort of thing. We have yet to see that from any of these guys outside of Nurse, but I think Nurse's game has changed a little bit. He's not that same guy anymore. I've got a real legitimate concern about this. Your thoughts? Do you think this defensive lineup can withstand the type of playoff pressure that comes?
That's a big question, right? Because we've wondered against Winnipeg and against Chicago. So it's a fair question to ask. I mean, hopefully it does against a team like LA, who is missing key cogs, and especially against a team like Vancouver, if they make it in, who is still a young rebuilding franchise. So outside of Darnell, it's a fair question to ask because I like Evan Bouchard for the record, but he's still developing. He's still a very young D-man. Duncan Keith, we know Duncan Keith is not the guy of 10 years ago. He's not the D-man who was winning Norris trophies, being a stud defenseman. So it's a fair question to ask. But they're going to have to find a way to do that because if you're defensively not strong in a postseason series, then you're out in 4 or 5 games. You have to find a way to step up in a postseason series, a 7-game series, especially if these games go to a double or triple overtime, Mike.
Yeah, that's where Darnell Nurse comes in handy, isn't it? The guy can play 2-3 games and look like he's not even broken a sweat yet. The nice thing is, if the Oilers do play against LA, at least for the first round, Drew Doughty being out, I say that it's a nice thing. The reality is, for hockey reasons, I would love to see Doughty in there. I love watching the best play against the best. I want to know that the Oilers have thoroughly kicked somebody's ass when they put their best lineup on the ice. right? I don't want to ever win a series and have, the Kings or the Flames or the Jets or somebody say, well, so-and-so was out. They were injured, right? You didn't get our best team. I want to know that the Oilers went in, kicked some ass, came out, and they did it against the best team. I'm not sure, Doughty may not be that much of a difference maker, but he is a difference maker. And he logs a lot of minutes, and he plays strong. He's always in the face of, the toughest players like the Connor McDavids, the Leon Draisaitl's. What do you think? I'm what I love. We're a half hour into the show, and we're talking playoff hockey. I love it. Maybe we're ahead of ourselves because there's still 2 games to be won. I feel pretty confident that the Oilers are going to take that next step and clinch up the playoffs here in the next couple games. We're going into the playoffs. I would say the last few playoffs, I remember 2017, Connor McDavid wasn't the best player on our team. Leon Draisaitl, on the other hand, is a playoff performer. Do you think, because I feel like the last 3, maybe 4 games have been very playoff style, like the officiating has been closer to playoff style. In fact, I watched the Calgary Flames and the Nashville Predators tonight. Not a lot of penalties, right? The kind of penalties that they do call, they're evening them up. They're really managing the game, as much as we love that term. But I feel like Connor has been outstanding of late, and people are playing him hard lately. Not that they don't play him hard every night, but it's a long season, right? And you put only so much effort as you need to get through the season and really get yourself pumped up for the playoffs. Who's going to be our best player, Connor or Leon this go round?
Who's going to be our best player? It is. Wow. You know what? I will give the edge to Connor. You know what? It's a great question to have. Like, that's a wonderful question to have for any team. Who's going to be the best player, Draisaitl or McDavid? Very few teams can have this dilemma at all in hockey, no matter what team you're on. So I will say Connor is the best player. He is a guy who's another 100-point year. He's finding a way to get through defenses like we haven't seen before. And I really feel he's going to find a way to get through playoff hockey, because we know what playoff hockey is. You mentioned, Michael, game management, the thing that I've hated for a very long time, because you don't see other leagues alter how the rules go come playoff time. You don't see in the NBA, LeBron James can now get tackled because it's the postseason. Like in the NBA, it doesn't happen. So, I feel like Connor can find a way to get through that now and be his best, be a Connor we have not seen quite yet. I mean, we saw flashes of him at that peak again in 2017. We didn't really see it at that much in 2020 in Chicago. We saw it briefly, and again briefly at Winnipeg. But I feel he'll find a way to break through and fully show what he can do in a postseason series in a couple of weeks here.
I think you might be right. I'm still, Dash, I see, is watching on Facebook. He says Leon, he's been the most valuable player this year. I'm kind of siding on the Leon side. I think Draisaitl ups it a notch. Like, when it starts to get tough, he gets just a little bit tougher and a little bit meaner. And you'll recall, he's the guy that'll put his stick between the legs and take the nut shot or whatever he does. Like, he's got a mean streak.
He gets a little pissy.
He does get a little pissy. And I love it, right? Like, the madder that guy gets, the more competitive he gets. He's the guy that you want to keep the beast in the cage, right? You don't want to piss him off too much, because he doesn't get mad and take penalties, although he does do that. But that's not all he does. He also gets mad and will pot 3 goals on you, or he'll play just a little bit more. Maybe he is fighting injury. He'll take that side slap shot with a broken hand, right? Because he's pissed off enough to do it.
That's true. And I mean, when we saw the game against the Rangers, when they were down 4-1, Leon goes by the Rangers bench and says, "Don't worry, it's coming." and they end up winning that game 6-5. Like, I love the fact that it was such a dry humor comment, but he was dead serious about that, and they found a way to come back. So he's the kind of guy where you're right, like you make Dry mad, he'll remember that. He'll remember that. He'll make you pay for it. I like that about his game a lot.
It is. It's fun, and I enjoy it just as much as any Oilers fan does, and I expect we'll see some of that come playoff time. Who do you think's our most likely playoff contender? Do you think it's LA? I mean, they hold their destiny right now, but they're on a they're middling right now. They're 4-5-1 in their last 10. Could be Vancouver. I mean, if Vancouver wins tonight, they're only 2 points behind LA. What are the chances of that? They're playing Ottawa too, by the way.
They are. You know what? To be realistic, LA probably does hold on to that last spot, but it would be fun to see Vancouver get in there, because Vancouver in the final days of Jim Benning and Travis Green, that team was dead in the water. That team was dead. Mm-hmm. But what Bruce Boudreau was able to do with that team, like that turnaround, is absolutely amazing. It's too bad the Jack Adams isn't given for postseason play, because I think if you gave the Jack Adams award later on in the year, you could put Boudreau in that mix if it was given later on, because what he's done to turn it around, I think it's very impressive. Like, if you would ask me back in December, are the Canucks going to be a playoff team? I'd have laughed at you. Like, no way, they're not there. So if they can get in, and if they do get that third seed, I think it'll be a very interesting series against Edmonton. I think that would be very interesting. Two young teams going at it, and Vancouver and net. The Canucks have been getting some great goaltending this year from Thatcher Demko when he's been healthy. Mm-hmm. So you know what? That might be a tougher series. If we do get Edmonton, Vancouver, if they do get in, that might go 6 or 7 games.
100%. I'm not. I know I saw a tweet earlier today. I don't know. I can't remember who it was, but somebody praising this. I'm cheering for Canada stuff, which I tell you what, I'm not that guy. I'll tell you right now. I don't know if you are. I am not that guy. I'm not cheering for any other Canadian team. I'm cheering for the Oilers. I'm an Oilers fan. I could care less about the other Canadian teams. In fact, that's not true. I care a lot about the other Canadian teams, and I want to see them fail miserably because, and I'll tell you this, I'll tell you why, is if, let's say, Arizona wins the Cup this year, which obviously they can't. If they win the Cup, the day they win the Cup, the next day, is anybody going to text you to rub it in? No. Is any like you? It won't matter. It won't matter. Nobody. It doesn't matter. If the Flames win the Cup, the very next day, your phone will be like buzzing off of the table because every Flames fan is going to be in your grill, like talking about the Flames, and they're going to lord that over you for a whole summer.
Yeah, like it is. You're right. It is weird. Like the NHL is one of the few sports in North America where there's multiple teams in Canada. It isn't like NBA, MLB, where there's one team that people rally around for the most part. So it is a bit weird to see people in Toronto cheering for Vancouver or other teams. Like, I mean, there's some markets where it doesn't happen. Like, if you'd ask my Leaf fans to cheer for the Habs, they would say, hell no, it's not going to happen.
Exactly.
But yeah, I do see that sometimes where some people do rally around, the Flame, the Canucks, the Oilers, the Jets, and those aren't their teams. It is kind of weird because would they reciprocate that to you? Would your friends cheer for your team just to be a Canada? I doubt it.
Exactly. And I think the Oilers are in that public enemy space where, if you're not, I think there's teams like, Calgary, Vancouver, Winnipeg, and Ottawa. Those are like the safe teams, right? Like any Canadian will cheer for those teams because they're not the enemy of everybody. But Oilers fans are a loud and boisterous bunch, and as we know on Twitter, they can be incredibly insulting. And you know what? All the power to us. I mean, we've got a huge fan base Lots of it, happily is from the glory days. Toronto, as we know, a huge fan base, and Montreal, huge fan base. I feel like those are the three largest fan bases in Canada. And, everybody wants to see them lose, right? Like when the Oilers were in a cup run in 2006, I remember reading an article about why people weren't as excited across Canada as they were when the Flames were in 2004. And the conclusion of the article was to say that people still hate the Oilers from when they won the cup all those times. And I get that. So, hey, I'm happy to be that person. I don't want to see Flames fans ever cheering for the Oilers, right? In fact, I want to see them, writhing in agony as we carry the cup one more time. That's how I feel. That's the way I am. So, having said that, what brought us down this path is if the Canucks do, by some chance, make it to the playoffs, it is a ridiculous run that gets them there. And it scares the life out of me. Because can you imagine being a Canucks fan? Your team just came back from everybody counting you out to being, in the bottom of the 20s in every power ranking for the first half of the season to now being in the playoffs. Almost as big as when St. Louis made it to the playoffs. If not bigger. I'd love to see. I'll have to look back at that and see what the history tells us. Vancouver will be riotous crazy.
Oh, geez. I see what you did there. Oh.
Yeah, like they are going to be absolutely insane. There's going to be so much like momentum going with that franchise. I just don't want to see it. I don't want to see the Oilers play the Canucks. And then if Demko gets on a heater, anyway, I'm. Let's just say I've got some Canucks fans out there. I'll apologize, although I doubt they watch the show. I hope they fail miserably and miss the playoffs.
They're a team playing with house money. If they get in, there's no expectation. If they get in, there's no expectations for them to win a round or heck, probably even win a game. They can go in carefree and say, you know what? People thought we were going to be a lottery team. We got in. Let's go in here. What happens. Because everybody else, they're going to play in a series, be it Edmonton, be it a Calgary, be it whoever else. If they get past those teams, the Colorado or St. Louis, those teams have all the weight on their shoulders to win. Vancouver, there is no weight on them if they get in. There really isn't.
True. And though I think still the concern is all of that momentum. Anyway, I'll be to be frank, I'm cheering for the Kings down the stretch. I hope I just want them to cinch it up. You know what? I'd love to see Vancouver get just close enough to say, hey, we gave it a good college try. We can pat ourselves on the back. I don't hate the Canucks that much. I hate the Flames that much. I don't hate the Canucks that much. Go ahead, go give yourselves a pat on the back and say you made a go of it, but don't make it in. I don't want to see that series. I feel like that's trouble in the making if they get there. All right, we are 40 minutes in. We got about 20 minutes left. We've got a game happening tomorrow. Dallas Stars. Oh man, they have. What's their record been the last 10? They haven't been particularly. They lost just the other night, right, against Calgary. So they're coming into this one now. They're sitting still in the wild card, and they need a win, just about as bad as anybody. But they're 5-3-2 in their last 10. First off, what do you think of Pavelski? Like, the guy is a point a game, and he's just about 82 now.
Yeah.
Let's see. He's 37 years old. He's not that old.
Yeah, he's a veteran. He's been around. He's been around in the league for quite some time now.
A point a game. I mean, how amazing is this guy? I mean, I hope he loses tomorrow, but how amazing is he? That's pretty awesome. And Jason Robertson, he's been good. This team is really down the lineup, just kind of solid, right? It's like the Florida Panthers light. You know what I mean? Like if Florida is going to beat you from lines 1 through 4, right? And Dallas is very similar. You know, you're getting the same kind of effort, the same kind of play from lines 1 through 4 with Dallas. It's just they're not as good as Florida Panthers. Nobody's as good as Florida Panthers this year. You think the Oilers? Of course, Mike Smith is getting the start. How do you think the Oilers are going to play tomorrow night?
Tomorrow, I think they do ride Smith again. But again, the big thing you mentioned there, it's going to be a tough task. Like, the big guys that shut down again are Pavelski, Robinson, Rupe Hintz. And you mentioned Jason Robertson right there. He is a guy who I love him. Jason Robertson is going to be the face of the Dallas Stars for the next 5 to 10 years. I love the guy. I love what he's done. 30-goal guy. Probably going to get 40 before the year is over. Watching him play, he is the biggest cog in my mind. You got to find a way to shut down because his shot is something else. And he's still developing. He's still one of the younger guys in the league. He could have won the Calder last year. He's going to be a phenomenal top line guy for Dallas eventually, in the years to come. You got to find a way to shut him down. And then remember, we talked about Pavelski and Robertson, forgetting they still have Tyler Seguin and Ben in this lineup.
And they're having great years. They're having great years. I mean, they're nothing to scoff at. They're both almost 20-goal scorers this year. You know, it's a good second line. And those guys are all-stars, right?
Exactly, yeah. It's a great point because, Dallas is a team, they can hurt you from lines 1 to 4. They've got a solid back end. But I really feel that you got to find a way to stop Robertson. He is going to be the biggest cog in that lineup who can hurt you from the first to the third. I really feel, Michael.
Yeah, they. I mean, you talked about the back end. That defense for Dallas is probably their strong suit. Mm-hmm. They've got some really good guys out there playing. In fact, it's really solid from top to bottom. This is a team, honestly, like I said, they're like a Florida Panthers light, just a solid all-around team. They just don't have maybe the scoring power that the Florida Panthers have, and maybe not quite the goaltending that the Panthers have. But they, whoever ends up playing them in the first round could be up for a bit of a challenge, right? Especially, I think, when you look at that defense, and we're talking about Pisani type of players in an organization. Dallas has got 12 of them playing forward this season, right? Any one of those guys could be the guy that goes on the heater for Dallas and makes a difference come postseason.
No, it's very true. Couldn't be more true about saying that.
Yeah, so it'd be exciting. I think it's right now it's looking more like Colorado, Dallas. So having said that, they won't be easy in the first round. Colorado looks poised to kind of take a good run in the playoffs for the first time in a long time. So for tomorrow night, we got Mike Smith in net. I'm not going to call shutout at all. We're not even going to. In fact, I shouldn't have even talked about it. But what's the key to the game? I mean, the Oilers, the top guys were shut out last game. Is that anything to be concerned about, or is that something to praise for this team that they can find a way to win despite McDavid and Draisaitl? Is there any concerns there? Kane's been on a bit of I'd say a lull as of late. Any concerns on that top line? Are you worried about Puljujarvi, who doesn't seem to have the finish, who's definitely a fan favorite, but just doesn't have the finish?
I would say, I'll start backwards here. I'll start off and say that it is good to see your second, third, and fourth line stepping up. You need that. You need those guys to come in and step up when the first line does struggle or has an off night or someone's out of the lineup. You need that because we see all the time in postseason runs where in a game late in a game 7 or whatever, an overtime game, the hero is almost always a guy from your third or second line or your fourth line that gets the overtime winner or a late goal. So I think it's a good sign to see those depth guys stepping up and getting points when called upon. But for the first line, it is a little bit concerning to see Vander Kane right now, 1 goal in his 11 games, and his defensive metrics have not been that great lately. I mean, Kane has scored 16 times this year, but lately he's had a tough run so far. You need him to step up in a big way like he has before. But, it's a bad time for him to go cold. But Puljujarvi, I know, yes, he takes a lot of heat, which I don't like. I've been a Puljujarvi guy for a very long time. And even though he's not scoring, even though, yes, he's scoring, he can still impact a game with a score line of 0-0-0 because he's still getting high danger chances. He's still getting to the front of the net. He's probably the best defensive forward on that core right there. You see him. He forechecks hard. He creates turnovers at the line. He creates turnovers by opposing players. He's doing things. He's doing other things are not scoring. He's still finding a way to contribute. If you can't score, find another way to contribute, which Jesse's been doing well for quite some time.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? The people that defend Puljujarvi, they talk about all of the other metrics that he has going for him, which you can't deny. The guy keeps the puck in his zone. You rarely see him hemmed in his own zone. He just has, and I can't even put my finger on it. It bugs me to see, like, he just plays a different game, and somehow it works, and we can't complain about it. We got to be happy about it because it does exactly what he said. But when he's on a line, they just do better. They get more chances. They get more opportunities. They spend more time in the offensive zone. You can't complain about that. Well, you can. I mean, we're Oilers fans. We can complain about anything. But the reality is, he makes that line better. He makes whatever line better that he's on. There was an argument done by Ryan Lotzberg, who is one of our contributors over at the Heavy Hockey Network, and he suggested throwing Puljujarvi onto the third line with Nuge to get that line firing. And this was very unpopular, but has maybe some sway. Putting Cassian on the top line with McDavid, who has some comfort with Cassian, who likes playing with him. And we've actually seen Cassian play some first-line minutes in the last couple of games. What's your thought? Any credence to that type of mentality? I mean, we know the reason why Lotzberg suggested it in his article was because we know Puljujarvi upgrades a line significantly. Any line that he's on does significantly better. Offensive zone time in almost every metric. And so his thought and consideration was prop up this third line, which maybe we don't need to after our showing last game. We'll have to see how they come out against Dallas. But do you think there's any credence to that? Do you think that we could do that, put Cassian on the top line, or should we be banishing Cassian to the press box?
Honestly, I see the idea of jump starting that third line. I get the mentality or thinking of it, but too many times when Zach Cassian plays in the first line, I mean, yes, he has scored in that line, but there's too many times where he doesn't have any impact at all. At least, yes, he is still strong defensively. He's still keeping the puck in the zone. Too many times, Cassian disappears on that first line when he plays those minutes. And yes, he is always a factor. He's always around. He's always getting to net. Like, too many times Cassian isn't noticeable. So I don't feel you should take Jesse off that line. His contributions are still far more than Zach Cassian's. Even when Cassian does find a way to get a goal here and there, I still think Jesse's contributions are far greater than Cassian's on that top line.
So as soon as I mentioned Cassian on the top line, our viewership, by the way, dropped by about 50%. Just kidding. Yeah, no, and please, for those of you watching right now, I am not suggesting we should put Cassian on the top line. I didn't agree with it, but I thought that Lotzberg brought up some interesting points, and his point was not to really. I'm not sure that he maybe articulated it well enough in that I don't think it was so much about putting Cassian on the top line as having Puljujarvi drop down to the third line to prop it up and finding somebody on that top line that McDavid's comfortable playing with. The reality is McDavid's going to get chances. He got chances when Lucic was playing on his line, right? So, and Lucic was quite often at the back blue line by the time McDavid was in on the net. And so, you expect that McDavid's going to have his same amount of touches. He's going to have some points. He's going to, contribute no matter who's on that line. He makes his line mates better. He's that type of player. Whereas Puljujarvi is also that type of player, but in maybe a different way, right? And so I get the reasoning. I'm with you. The puck dies with Cassian. I want Cassian to be successful. I want to see the same guy we saw in the playoffs, a few years ago. But he's not the same guy. He got a contract for, what he got. And I think that's what's keeping him in the lineup. I think if he didn't have the contract, we'd probably see him, as I said, right in the press box, right? Instead, he's in there. Do you think he'll bring value to this team come playoff time? Do you think we could see something out of him like we did in years past?
I think in limited minutes in a third line, fourth line role is possible, but I don't feel you do want to be moving him up to the second or first line come the playoffs if once again he's not the guy you saw in 2017 and the guy you see in 2020, 2021, where he really wasn't a factor at all. Limited minutes in the third or fourth line, sure, you can have him play there. But beyond that, I don't think you should be doing that whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100% agree with you again. All right, let's move to Facebook. Let's move to YouTube. Get your comments in. I've got a couple here. I've got Renegade Man says, Kings losing Doughty and Anderson is a huge blow. It's funny, Eichel will miss the playoffs for the 7th year in a row unless Vegas wins 5 games in a row. Thoughts on Eichel? I mean, this guy, like, is this Taylor Hall? What's the deal with Eichel?
You know what? I just say it's the luck he's had is just horrific. To get out of Buffalo, go to Vegas, thinking that he would be that fact. I mean, he has scored though for Vegas. They called
them the Stanley Cup favorites when that trade was announced, right? Like lots of people were saying they got to be in the contention.
Yeah, and it was fair to assume because when Jack Eichel is on, when he's playing well, when he's healthy, he is one of the best forwards in the league. So to see it not work out is unfortunate for him because I really would have loved to have seen. I think if you're at TNT ESPN, you are probably salivating at the idea of a first round matchup, Vegas Edmonton, Connor Eichel. I mean, if you're a network, you'd have loved that series.
Yeah.
So I gotta say, just a lot of bad luck for him. But hey, never say never. It is a Golden Knight. This is a team that finds a way to pull out success, even when the chips are down, no matter what. So I wouldn't say they're done yet, but as it stands right now, it's just awful luck for him to go from Buffalo to Vegas and potentially again miss the postseason. He still has not played a playoff game in his career.
That's crazy. It is insane to think. And while it wasn't a lot of people, there was the odd person suggesting that Eichel could have went first overall. They were ridiculous comments at the time. They're still ridiculous now, but he was and is still a premier player in this league. I'd be curious when it's all said and done and when his career is over, what we end up talking about if he finds that playoff success or not. All right, Wendell says the Nugent-Hopkins-Puljujarvi line would work. I would like a McLeod, Nugent-Hopkins, and Puljujarvi line, or a different left wing who also plays center to help them win face-off. The depth helps spread minutes throughout the lineup. Cassian stays on the fourth line. How would you feel about that, a McLeod, Nuge, Puljujarvi line?
I'll admit that is an interesting one. I mentioned Ryan McLeod earlier. He is someone whose jump I've loved seeing him come in Bakersfield. Again, I'm not a guy who wants to see Puljujärvi go down, but Ryan McLeod is someone you put in with those two guys. I think that's probably one of the better third lines in the league, personally, if you do put those three together.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would love to see, and I think we will see, McLeod get increased responsibility in the playoffs. He's just playing well enough to deserve it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And what's going to happen is he's going to get on a bit of a heater, and Woodcroft's not going to have any choice, right? And that's exactly what you want. You want to make it so that the coach has no choice but to play you. And McLeod's been doing all of that. He's been great in that regard. He's doing really well. In regards to Leon Draisaitl, Dash on Facebook says, like Iggy, don't wake him up. Colorado game, beast mode shift, reverse hit, etc. I remember that. That was awesome.
Yep.
Canucks in the first round and Flames in the second. Could you imagine? All right, let's talk about that. I mean, how good would that feel? I don't want them to play the Canucks for the reasons I mentioned, but how good would that be?
That would be interesting. That would be. Edmonton hasn't played Vancouver in the postseason since '92. They haven't played the Flames in the postseason since '91. And I'm 29 years old. I don't recall ever seeing the Oilers play the Flames or the Canucks in the postseason series. The team my generation saw playing the Oilers the most was Dallas. Kids my age have a bigger hate for Dallas than Calgary. So it'll be cool to see. It'd be cool to see those matchups for the first time. I think Edmonton Calgary. I think that would be a very violent series.
Yeah, and a good one. I would love to see that. The entertainment would be outstanding.
Yes.
I'm really curious about Calgary. I still think, until Gaudreau shows us otherwise, I think he disappears in the playoffs. You watch him play, he gives the puck away anytime there's any element of physicality in the play. You can do that in regular season. Guys aren't, they're not going as hard at you, but playoffs are a whole different story. We'll see. He has played a tougher game this year. He's certainly putting up the points. He's closing in on he's third in scoring right now, I think, with 107 points, only 3 points behind Connor McDavid. That would be unbelievable if he was to do anything to get close. We'd never hear the end of it. Flames fans, as ridiculous as they are sometimes. Throw that out there. All right, Wendell again. How about this? Evander Kane for $4.5 million brings to light another question. I'm going to tack on to Wendell's comment here. Who's more important, Evander Kane or signing Puljujärvi in the offseason?
I absolutely think 110% it's more important to sign Jesse Puljujärvi than Evander Kane. Jesse Puljujärvi right now and going forward, I feel is a stronger is a better forward offensively and defensively. He's a little bit younger as well too than Evander Kane. And of course, we know Evander. We know what happened with Evander away from the rink. We know about the drama with other areas of his life. So I think it's much more stable to bring Jesse back, give Jesse a long-term deal. If you do bring Evander Kane back, I think it has to be a short-term deal. It has to be no more than a 1 year or 2 year deal. I don't believe in locking in Evander Kane for longer than 2 years. Personally, if it was me making the call and I had to re-sign Evander Kane, it'll be no more than the 1 year deal.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. In fact, it scares me to even think about re-signing Kane at this point, although he's shown, he's surprised me so far. He seems like a different guy, at least right now. He seems into every game. We could talk about, his a little bit of a streak. I wasn't aware that he was going to have the hearing today or yesterday or the meeting about the San Jose contract, which happened today. That could have been weighing on his mind. I mean, the mental part of the aspect of his game, it could factor into a little bit of this previous stretch. On YouTube, Some Stranger. I always love that name. Regular listener. Thank you. Thank you for being some stranger. He says Jesse, sign Jesse. Yeah, 100%. Wendell Back says 4.5 for 91, 2.5 for 56, 2.5 for 13, 1 mil for McLeod would all cost 10.5. I'd have to look at the numbers. I you know what, I don't know, but those numbers look good, and I'm curious. I'm curious where Yamamoto ends up in terms of a contract value. Of course, the Oilers hold a little bit of the. Well, he's arbitration eligible this year, so I'd have to compare his numbers to see what he'll be eligible for. But it's more than likely, given the fact that they've got both Kane and Puljujarvi to sign. Puljujarvi is also arbitration eligible. We'll see. We'll see if they can get those numbers in. They could get Yamamoto on 2.5 for something of a bridge deal to see where he goes, I guess. He'd be worth, I don't know. Yeah, I think he's worth 3.5 to this team, if not more. He's consistently played top two lines and done well, and he's been a difference maker a lot of nights. I'm a big fan, as you are. We talked about. All right, we're running down here. We're just over the hour mark. I want to get your thought. Tomorrow night's game, what's your prediction?
Tomorrow night's game, I will predict Edmonton wins 5-3, and we will get 2 goals from Draisaitl, 1 from McDavid, and 1 from Donnell Nurse.
Oh, right on. Calling for a Nurse goal. That's one hell of a prediction, by the way, because I would just give the score and hope nobody calls me out to say how it's going to break down. I'm thinking more of a 4-2 game, and I'm not going to talk about who's going to score what. But if I would love to see Draisaitl score a hattie, get the power play going tomorrow night. I think, I'd love to see, what I want to see, most importantly, actually, is a great game from Smith. I could give a shit about third shutout, right? And I don't think it's realistic. That's incredibly difficult to do. But if he plays a good game, I'll feel really confident going into the postseason between both goaltenders. I initially, and maybe we should talk about this. Do you have how are you doing for time? You got 5-10 minutes?
Okay, I have time. I'm good for time, Michael. Yeah.
All right. We're gonna go a touch overtime. We're going into overtime. Final 5 minutes. All right. Let's talk goaltending. Here's my thought. We talk about Smith now. He's obviously playing lights out hockey. He's playing great. I think some of it, there's a couple of those games where he's made some unbelievable saves, scare me a little bit because, you talk to goalies, NHL goalies that have been around the league. They say anytime I make an unbelievable save, it means that I was out of position. And I feel like with Smith, that's a lot of the time. Like he's, making the big, the big kick save or whatever, what have you. And I feel just positionally, you watch a guy like Markstrom for the Flames, or you're talking about Demko, or you talk about who did we have? Kemper.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just looks like boring goaltending, right? But you can't get the puck by them because positionally they are so unbelievably strong. And Smith, on the other hand, is anything but boring to watch, right? Like he's constantly diving for the puck. He's doing something. He's making the saves, but that's a little bit of puck luck in my mind, and scares me a touch. If he comes out with the strong game tomorrow, I feel a little bit better. But we did this question that I'm going to publish here on Heavy Hockey Network right away, our mailbag. We do a mailbag. We get some questions. One of the questions in was, who would you start in the playoffs? And I suggested Koskinen. Might be a little bit harder to do that after the recent stretch. But there was Jack Michaels was on straight off the pipe with Dash and Durst not that long ago, and Jack I think is from the Atlanta area or somewhere around there. He referenced a saying that they have out there, which is when you get invited to the dance, you dance with who brung you, right? And meaning obviously, if you're going to the dance, if you're going to the playoffs. You take into the playoffs the players that got you there. And I really feel like Koskinen is the guy that got the Oilers here. I think Smith has been the guy secondary in the last few games, but I feel like Koskinen has been the soldier for the year so far. And while he hasn't been perfect, he's been good enough to get the Oilers the wins they need to get into the playoffs. But now I'm questioning. I would have said Koskinen last week, but we'll see how tomorrow goes. Who would you put in between the pipes, and how would you run that? I mean, you can't, win and you're in, maybe. I don't know. It's a 2-goalie system for the Oilers, right?
Honestly, right now, it is a 2-goalie system right now. And I'm more inclined to go with Koskinen. But to be honest with you, Michael, if I was in charge and it was my call, I would run with 3 goalies and call up Stuart Skinner, because you look at the stats, Stuart Skinner statistically is the better goalie of all 3. So I would still want Skinner in Edmonton if either guy can't get it done, because Stuart Skinner, again, a younger goaltender than these two guys, played well, a big netminder, someone who is still to an extent to opposing teams untested. Like a lot of teams didn't really face Skinner yet. He's still up to opposing teams, still a bit of a question mark for a postseason series on both ends. So I would really bring him up and see what he can do if a Koskinen struggles or if a Smith struggles, because he's fresh. Like he's coming into a NHL postseason for the first time if you do call him up. So I'd run with all 3 in the postseason, but I would start game 1 Koskinen. And if he does struggle, then I would be more inclined, if you have Skinner in Edmonton, going to Stuart Skinner for a game 2, if you have to.
Yeah, interesting. This might be an area where I disagree. I love Skinner. I agree with you 100%. He's probably the best goalie out of the 3 of them, which says something about our inability to get a good goaltender this year. Smith has played well as of late, which is great. I would have said Koskinen a couple of days ago to start the playoffs. If Smith, as I said, has a good outing tomorrow night against Dallas, I might be more inclined to, because I think Smith will start one more game, unless if somehow he got another shutout, then you'd have to start him the 4th game, I think. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of, you're bound to the streak until it's over, right? I mean, that's how I would feel about that. But if depending on next game, that's kind of how I would decide who would start the playoffs. You got to have a bit of a short leash. I wouldn't go win and you're in, though, because you could lose a game in triple overtime. Does that really count, right? Like, yeah, like you kind of have to make that call as it happens. The only reason I wouldn't bring in Skinner is this. I think there's only so many games in the playoffs, right? Only so many games. You don't have the luxury. You kind of, in some ways, you got to play your gut a little bit, right? And you got to trust your gut. You got to trust the guys in between the pipes to kind of give you what they're going to give you. Because if you've lost 3 and you bring in Skinner for that, that 4th game, and he loses, well, everybody's going to say you brought in a guy that's an AHL caliber goalie who we know could probably do well, and that's what lost you the 4th game. I just don't think there's enough games to lose that you'd have Skinner play any games. The only way we would see Skinner I think we see Skinner in the net is if something happens to Smith, who is always at risk of injury. Every time he goes down, he seems to get up really slowly, and every time I swear under my breath, because I think this is the one that keeps him out again for another few weeks. He's not a young guy, as we know. I know when I fall down, I still play a lot of hockey, played tonight, and I'm in my 40s. I know it takes me a little bit longer to get up every time, too. So I worry about Smith. That's the only reason I think we see Skinner, is if there's an injury. And then I think Skinner plays backup until somebody gets pulled for him to come in. And then he only gets started if he played so well after getting called in that he deserves to start the next game. So that's the only way I think we see Skinner. But I like your thinking. I just don't think it's going to happen.
There are more strange things have happened, though. Stranger things have happened. And, hey, you know what? I think to a lot of people, it would bring Skinner up. It would show to a lot of people in the fan base that, hey, they're trying something different. They're not going in with same old.
Woodcroft's the guy too, right? Like he's the guy that would do that. Something different.
Exactly. Because I think there is still an element of, even though Woodcroft wasn't there for those losses, there's still an element of, we tried the same thing in 2020, 2021, we ran into a brick wall. At least Skinner is showing he's a different element in net. He isn't same old. And again, as much as Smith is having his heater right now, you mentioned right there, he is a 40-year-old goaltender who was missed time this year due to injuries. And that's troubling going into a postseason series where, of course, there are guys at his age who have played well, but he has had injuries with his knee, with his wrist. And that is a bit concerning because, knock on wood, it doesn't happen again, but it's still in the back of your mind, like you said, if he falls again, is this the time where he has to miss a week or two once again?
Yeah. Yeah, and it could happen anytime with him. All right. We're well through overtime. Now we're into shootout. So we're going to call it a night. As is the case every time on Oilers Live Tuesday, I let my guest have the last word. And when you're done the last word, Avry, what do you need to say so I can shut it down for the night?
Good night.
There you go. So we got this straight. Josh from Tough Call Pod was, as I told you earlier before we started, was the first person to get the good night properly. And so I'm counting on you to keep. Let's ride this streak, and let's do it well. But you got as much time. The floor is yours, Avry. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. It was a pleasure. I knew it would be. I knew I'd have a lot of fun having you on. You follow Avry on Twitter at Avry. It's pretty easy. AVRY. Not doesn't get much simpler than that. As I said, he hosts the Avry and Brad Show and Avery's Sports Show. Is that that's the name of it, right?
That's correct. Yeah, Avery Sports Show and the Brad and Avery Hour. So
and the Brad and Avery Hour. That's right. Yes. There we go. I'll get it. And then also ZoneTime, right, over at Yahoo.
Yes, ZoneTime, Yahoo Sports.
Yeah,
it's a very fun hockey show we do weekly.
Yeah, it looks fun. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I saw a clip or two the other day, which is good. So you've been putting out Oilers content and hockey content for quite a while now. I'm a big fan and happy to have you on. We'll have you on again if you enjoyed yourself tonight.
Of course, most definitely.
All right, so here we go. One last thing. I need to tell everybody, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, go over to youtube.ca/heavyhockey and hit the subscribe button. We need the subscriptions. We want to be able to, keep giving you content, and we love everybody that tunes in every week. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun. We are doing Heavy Hockey Network. One of the contributors over here has been doing a post-game every game lately. I think next up is Josh from Tough Call Pod is doing tomorrow night's post game, and it's been a little bit of a analysis of the game that was, and then a queue up for the upcoming game, and something new. And we're getting better at it as we go. It's I think we're on game 4 or 5. So the first I'm not going to say the first couple were awful. They were actually pretty good. The first couple I did were awful. The other guys are propping it up, so they're doing a great job. But we're getting better as we go, and we're doing new things. If you want to see anything, or anybody that's out there watching tonight, or you want to be a part of this, please reach out to me, whether it's on Twitter at Oilerslive or Michael at heavyhockey.com is my email. Happy to have people join in. We've got a really great group. There are 9 contributors to Heavy Hockey Network, and it's been just a ton of fun. If anything, just to get on the very exclusive Heavy Hockey group chat, which is usually the highlight of my day. So that's been a lot of fun. Anyway, now I've done tons of talking. Avry, you're up. You get the last word. Thanks so much for being here.
Of course. Anyways, to wrap things up, I do want to plug my latest piece for the Hockey News, in which I wrote about the Black Hockey History Tour. If you don't know what that is, it is a tour bus going across North America, 28 NHL cities, showcasing the history and contributions of Black players, media, writers, designers. It is being curated by Kwame Mason, who created the Soul on Ice movie and podcast. It's amazing to learn about how many Black contributors have contributed to the game of hockey, going back to the 1890s to now. You can find content there on Willie O'Ree, Joe McGinley, George LaRock, current guys like Evander Kane, Darnell Nurse. I encourage you all to go check it out. I think right now it was in Edmonton last week. It's in Seattle and LA this weekend here. So hey, if you're in those markets, go check it out. Learn about some hockey history that is important to know about. I had a blast. It's fun to learn more about the game as a Black man in hockey. Anyways, Michael, I'm all done. Good night.
Oilerslive.